This video is brought to you by Bespoke. Hey noble ones, welcome back to my channel. This is the Metatron speaking, and today we're talking about Thermae Romae Novae, an absolutely adorable anime set in ancient Rome, where the protagonist, a architect specialized in the construction, design and building of Roman baths, ends up in modern day Japan. An absolutely hilarious work, but is it historically accurate? Well, some of you might ask, does it even matter if it's historically accurate in its representation of ancient Rome, considering the fact that we are talking about an anime that involves time travel? And even though that's a good point, I'd like to also point out the fact that at the end of almost each episode, you've got a good 5 minutes chunk where you see the creator, together with some historical advisors, showing off ancient Roman ruins. So they literally went to Italy and they talk about history and Rome. So even though this is again a form of fiction, a certain level of historical accuracy was planned for the anime. So this video again is not an attack or a critique, we're just having fun, so let's have fun. Generally speaking, I'd like to praise the producers of this anime because they did a pretty damn good job at representing the ancient Roman Empire of the time of the Principate, so the early empire. And if I had to sort of compare it to very famous blockbusters or Hollywood productions set in ancient Rome, the anime would win. But with that being said, I've written down a whole list of things that are unfortunately incorrect. So to give you a little bit of a roadmap, we'll be talking about armor, clothes, architecture, Latin, food and drinks in ancient Rome, and the way the protagonist, being an ancient Roman, reacts to certain modern goods. And now I'd like to take a moment to mention the sponsor that made this video possible, Bespoke Post. If you don't know what Bespoke is, then you are missing out. Bespoke is a monthly membership club delivering really amazing boxes of top shelf goods from under the radar brands. And what's really cool is that 90% of the products in the boxes come from small businesses, many of which are here in the USA. Bespoke is free to join, and every month Bespoke introduces its members to cool new products ranging from barware to home and kitchen goods, clothing, useful stuff. Now that's excellent in terms of value because the contents of each box have a retail value of over $70, but you get them for $49. And besides, before shipping the box to you, you get to preview the contents of the box, and if you like it you keep it, if you don't like it you can swap it for a different box, or you can skip the monthly box altogether, in which case you pay nothing. You only pay for what you want. You will fill in a preference quiz and the system will select new boxes every month for you. The guys at Bespoke sent me 3 boxes, so let's check them out. The first box is called Weekender, and it contained a durable canvas bag with a metal hardware and reinforcement frame and thick leather handle. This is my favorite out of the 3 boxes because now I use this every time I go out filming my videos. I've put helmets and pieces of armor and it worked great. It's heavy duty and trustworthy. The second box is called Hibernate, and it contains a pair of comfortable slippers made from soft leather stitched into an open back moccasin slipper silhouette with an interior lining made from plush for fur, handmade in Mexico by skilled leather artisans. Very comfortable. The third box is called Smoked, and it contained a cocktail smoking and infusion kit. This simple set allows you to infuse cocktails and more with rich smoky flavour. It includes glass cloche, oak smoking platform, a butane torch with an adjustable flame, and hickory wood smoking chips. How cool is that? Now to get a 20% discount off your first box, click the link in the description below and enter the code META20 at checkout, or use this URL code. And big thanks to Bespoke for sponsoring my video. The first thing I'd like to talk about is the Roman children. I love the fact that they included something called the bulla, which is the sort of necklace that you can see all children are wearing. That is absolutely historically accurate and it shows a very good level of research. The bulla was something given to all babies, male and female, highborn and lowborn, who were citizens of Rome. Of course, high-class people would have had it made of precious metals, whereas low-class people would have had it made of something inexpensive. But the bulla was something given to the children for protection. And we're not only talking about fortune or protection, meaning that being protected through the gods, but also legal protection. In my video, Sex and Sexuality in Ancient Rome, I actually specifically talk in details about the bulla, how it was in the form of a sun for little boys and half moon for little girls, although to be specific, the one worn by little girls was called lunula. and it basically was a way to tell people, this is a child of a Roman citizen, so do not touch him or we will destroy you. It's nice to see that they took something of the Roman culture and represented it correctly in the anime.
Si quidem res Romana antiqua velle quites mediaevi vel Japones samurai tipi placent, fias nobilis nostris odalici, ad plura metatronis videnda, subscribite huic canali.
Now, when it comes to the clothing, there are good things and bad things. The belts look really bad. They literally look like modern-day leather belts. The tunics look very well fitted, in fact a bit too much. We know that the ancient Romans tended to enjoy flowy, oversized tunics that then they would tuck in. However, the main problem that I have with the tunics, or the tunicae, and the way they are represented in the anime, is the colors. As I've said many times on this channel, it's true that oftentimes Hollywood has represented ancient cultures, whether it be the Norse, the Romans, or medieval people, as dry, grey, brown, and miserable when it comes to colors, and we know that that's incorrect. So in this anime, the fact that we see a lot of color variety is correct. The problem is that colors, however, cannot be placed randomly, and very differently from the modern era where any color is basically available to anyone. In the ancient world, colors had a very different range of availability, price, so it is really mind-blowing to see purple, which was a high-end, high-status and extremely expensive color to produce in order to dye tunics. And purple is actually quite abundant in the anime when it comes to the tunics of even low-class people. It could take up to 10,000 seashells imported from modern-day Morocco to be able to produce the purple tint to dye a tunic, and that would be extremely expensive. So expensive that only an emperor, a senator, or a very successful merchant could afford it. Undyed linen and woolen tunics should be the norm, followed by some forms of red, some yellow. Green could be problematic because in order to get green you needed to first dye a tunic yellow, so green was a bit more of an expensive process, and blue would depend on the kind of blue, some hues being very expensive and other being very cheap. The Romans also bleached some of their tunics pure white, although those would have been worn mostly for special events. So all in all, it's very nice to see color variety, but the placements of those colors should depend on rank and social status. And another thing I'm noticing is the lack of fascia ventralis, a sort of cloth belt that the Romans would wear around their tunics that would basically act as a pocket, if you will. Several times, as he is in modern Japan, when the protagonist is given some sort of clothes that he has no idea how to wear, we see two things that I find really interesting. First, he tends to wear these clothes as a toga, which was a very formal kind of clothing worn by the upper class in ancient Rome. That could make sense if he wants to show off, so perhaps I would have preferred it if he did it in front of someone that he thought was important. I do complain, however, with his reaction to the fabric. He thinks that the fabric is incredible, and by the looks of it, since it looks like some sort of yukata that you get in Japan, it's probably cotton. So it wouldn't really be something that would blow his mind. People had access to silk from China and had access to cotton from India. They would have been a bit more expensive, particularly the silk, but it wouldn't have been unheard of. So his reaction is a little bit of an overreaction. The overall architecture, the looks of the buildings is incredible. They did a great job. It really looks as if they looked at Roman buildings and they literally reproduced them as they are. Very, very faithful. Perhaps a bit too faithful, however, because they do show statues being completely white and temples being completely white. And we know that both statues and temples in the classical period would have been painted and in full color. It's as if the shapes have been brought back to look new, but they're not period because they're lacking the colors. One thing that I really liked in the anime is when the protagonist, whom now is in modern day Japan, is offered a drink. And the drink is made of milk mixed with fruit of some sorts, and it's given to him. And he absolutely adores it. Now, would there be a realistic reaction to a milk-based drink if that was given to an ancient Roman? Well, of course, modern drinks compared to ancient drinks are packed with sugars. Even though sugar wasn't readily available in the classical period, we know that the Romans liked sweet things because they loved adding honey to their drinks, including wine. So I don't think it would feel strange for an ancient Roman to drink a drink that has been heavily sweetened with sugar. But the fact that he recognizes that it's milk and loves it is kind of weird. Why? Well, because most of the milk we drink in our day and age is cow's milk. Now, the Romans had access to cow's milk, but it wasn't their favorite, and it was considered to be a kind of a low-class drink because it was drank in the farms by people in the countryside. And we know that our protagonist is definitely a city dweller. He's a city guy. And considering the fact that he does think that the modern-day Japanese are slaves, that's his reaction when he sees them, for him that drink would have been considered a little low class. Some city dwellers would drink milk, but usually they would choose other varieties such as goat milk because it's easier to digest. The moment he would understand that it's milk-based, he might consider to be below him. This is probably the thing that drives me nuts the most, the overwhelming presence of leather bracelets. I have a dedicated rant video to ancient Roman leather bracelets, link in the description below, but to give you a little summary of that, that's a Hollywood trope. Absolutely no evidence whatsoever for leather bracelets being so ubiquitous like we see in the movies, and unfortunately we now see here. In the anime, every Roman has a pair of leather bracelets. There is absolutely no historical evidence for that. The Romans didn't wear leather bracelets. Of course, I can't say 100% that it never happened that an ancient Roman wore a leather bracelets. Of course, perhaps someone did. In the overwhelming majority of iconography, statuary, representations, no leather bracelets. The only reason why we see this obsession with leather bracelets for all Romans in early Hollywood movies is because the first sort of generation of Roman movies in Hollywood was in the 90s, and everybody was wearing a watch at the time, and therefore even removing the watch for your character, you could still see, because of the tanning of everywhere else, the mark of your watch, and so they had to cover it up, and they put on the leather bracelets. Everybody liked them, they thought that it looked good, and so from that point onward, every Roman was wearing leather bracelets. We see this even in games, and unfortunately what they did for this anime is that they literally copy-pasted a Hollywood trope. Leather bracelets for Romans? Incorrect. But now, let's talk about the armor, because of course, during the whole series, we will see the occasional Roman soldier. So, are they represented well? Well, here, for reference, I have a very well-made, historically accurate Lorica Segmentata Corbridge Type A, which was the sort of armor, or one of the types of armor that was available to the soldiers, specifically at this time, early Principate. This armor was made by Fabrica Cacti in Poland. You'll find a link in the description below. Check them out. Very good smiths. This is one of those points where I'd like to strengthen the idea that this anime did a better job than the majority of movies and films out there that are set in ancient Rome. The armor looks really well, but it's not perfect. One of the things that I like is the variety. You see Lorica Hamata, so mail. You see Lorica Segmentata, so the banded, plated armor that soldiers, some legions used at this time. You see the Musculata, which was a muscle cuirass used by high-end officers and emperors. The helmets are well made, the crests are correct for centurions. I mean, they did a great job. So why do I say that I have problems with it? Well, to be honest, this is a little nitpicky perhaps, but one of the problems I noticed is sometimes the fastening method is incorrect. Like, for example, in this picture, we can see that these two legionaries, even though, again, they look very believable, except for the frigging leather bracelet, drives me nuts. Notice how the pectoral plates are fastened. Now, I've done the same thing on my armor here, exactly to show you how it should not be worn. This is unfortunately a reenactorism. Sometimes some historical reenactors wear their Lorica Segmentata wrong. One thing that is important, coming to armor, when it comes to proper reconstruction, is that the pectoral plates should try to be a little further up, and you achieve that by wearing some sort of padding underneath, in this case a thoracomachus or subarmalis. But most importantly, if the plates are well aligned, so they were made well, there should be no gap in between the pectoral plates. If soldiers really wore their armor that way, it would completely defeat the purpose of wearing the entire set, because you would be exposing your heart, which, as you know, is in the center of your chest, tilted to the left, but it's in the center. It would expose your heart to piercing damage. In other words, anyone could stab the soldier in the chest, bye-bye. So that's the first thing, pectoral plates should overlap properly and there should be no gaps in the center of the armor. Secondly, the soldiers never seem to be wearing focalia. So a focale is a scarf, usually worn by Roman soldiers, which would really help in avoiding the horrible chafing that you would get with the plates just constantly rubbing against your neck. We know that it was something that was part of the Roman kit. that I believe that perhaps the person who drew the armor didn't really know how armor works, and they just copied what they could see in reenactment, and therefore sometimes they copied good things, but other times they might have copied bad things and bad reenactorism and bad habits that some people have without knowing. One thing I really liked is that the modern Japanese, when they see him, they say, wow, he looks like a Greek statue, which, I mean, he does. He's very tall, particularly compared to the Japanese. I mean, it's possible. I have, again, a video on the top 10 myths of ancient Rome where I do talk about the fact that it's not true that all Romans would have been short. So maybe he's just a little bit of a taller than average Roman, which is something plausible. It's possible. As he goes to Japan, and particularly when he interacts with the elderly, the older generation. I mean, as you know, I've lived in Japan and I'm 175 and I tended to be taller than every elderly person in Japan. He again tends to meet a lot of elderly Japanese people, then I think it makes sense that he's a lot taller than them. Okay, now this is gonna be interesting, I think, for those of you who like languages. There are 3 mistakes in the title alone in Latin. So let's talk about these. As you can see, the title is written in katakana, so basically the syllabic alphabet used by the Japanese to render, generally speaking, foreign words. So for those of you who can't read it, I'm going to read it now for you the way it's written syllable by syllable, and then I'll tell you the three mistakes that we've got. So first of all, you would read it Thermae Romae Novae. So already for those of you who know about the difference between ecclesiastical Latin, so more of a modern Latin, and classical Latin, the V of novae should not be there if you're using classical. And they are using classical because instead they're using separated diphthongs. So basically, if this was all ecclesiastical, it would have been Thermae Romae Novae. And so you would have rendered it in katakana as Thermae Romae Novae. Instead, in full classical, this should be Thermae Romae Novae. So there is a mistake because the tenten shouldn't be there, because the tenten is what is turning the U into a V, which shouldn't be in classical, and it's a mismatch considering that we have got full I instead of simplified E. But also, it should be, I would actually render it as a full Wa, because that's how it was pronounced, rather than the little A here. This is a minor one. But another problem is, again, phonemic vowel length. I'll talk more about this, but in Latin there is a difference between short and long vowels. I'll say this a bit in a minute, but Romae should be a long O, and they can express that in Japanese, so it's kind of weird that they didn't. They turned it into Romae, instead it's Romae, so the O should have been lengthened. Even though when the characters are in ancient Rome, they use Japanese, of course, for obvious reasons. I mean, at the end of the day, it's like the English spoken by every alien race in Star Trek. It's fine. It's for the audience. Still, they chose to sort of give a little bit of authenticity to the anime, extra authenticity, should I say, because when the character is in modern Japan, even though he thinks in Japanese, for the audience, we interpret that as being in reality Latin in his head. The reason for that is because when he actually speaks to the Japanese, he uses Latin, and I find it absolutely hilarious that the Japanese think he's Italian, because, I mean, yes, he is, technically. So how well does he speak Latin? Well, of course, they are using classical or restored pronunciation of the 1st century, and I think they did a very good job. The pronunciation of the consonant is excellent, and they do have a very good usage of phonemic vowel length. And for those of you who don't know, in Latin there is a difference between long vowels and short vowels, and this is called phonemic vowel length because the same word with the same vowel will have different meaning depending on the length of those vowels. And that's something that Japanese as a language has. Now, of course, if you want to know more about the authenticity and a very in-detailed analysis of the Latin, you should definitely check out the video made by my friend Luke over at Polemethy, link in the description below. But here, I will mention a thing or two. The phonemic vowel length is well represented also because Japanese itself has phonemic vowel length. So perhaps for them, for the Japanese voice actor, it wasn't too difficult to understand. The consonants are definitely pronounced in the correct classical Latin way. The overall intonation sounds a little Japanese, so I understand that the person is not trained in Latin. The person who is dubbing does not speak Latin. Now, one thing that my friend Luke discovered that I didn't know, but thanks to him I know that, is that if you switch the language, the Latin will change. Because of course the people dubbing the anime for each language had to try themselves reading the Latin sections, and I have to say that the Italian version unfortunately is not the best. but it isn't the worst. The Portuguese version has very good nasalized M's, which you don't have in the Italian version, unfortunately, but the Portuguese version pronounces the C incorrectly in more of a modern way, so at least they didn't do that in the other versions of Latin. All in all, I think it's a very believable and very nice approximation of what classical Latin would have sounded like, and to be honest, considering the fact that oftentimes the way Japanese butchers other languages with katakana, like the way they say McDonaldo instead of McDonald's, I'm impressed that the voice actor did actually a very good job with his Latin. Thumbs up for that. When it comes to the way physicality is represented, we see that most ancient Romans are represented very fit. And I think that that's good, because people in the classical period, and we could say even people in the medieval period, would have had a completely different kind of approach to life. They would have been riding horses, they would have been walking everywhere. And so the fact that particularly someone who's used to manual labor looks very fit to modern day standard makes sense, because compared to them, we spend our day on very plush couches and chairs. Most of our jobs are not very manual. We spend a lot of time on the internet and watching TV, and we drive everywhere. So I believe that even someone who wasn't necessarily a warrior or a soldier would be fitter than the average Joe of modern day. Maybe a little over exaggerated, everybody looks like a freaking statue, but still pretty cool. And that was the last point of this video. So overall, I think they did a great job. There are a few things that I wish they had hired an advisor that could help them with those little details, but I do believe that the anime is great, and these little inaccuracies do not take away from the enjoyment and the entertainment value that the anime provides. Very well done, very good job, and very fun. So if you haven't watched it, absolutely check it out and perhaps see if you can find other things that I missed that you think were incorrect. As always, thank you very much for watching, and thank you for supporting my channel, and don't forget to click the link in the description to check out Bespoke and their amazing author. Thank you very much for watching, and remember, the Metatron has spread his wings. Valete!